Hi, welcome back to McGinn's WoodShop. Today I've been asked to make some wedding boxes to send out as invites. He's going to send out the invites with a little bottle inside the boxes, and he asked me to make them. So first thing I did, I decided I'm going to make them out of oak plywood, and from that I want to get the maximum out of all my plywood that I got to make the most amount of boxes. So of course the first thing I did was lay out the entire thing, size, how I'm going to do the joints, how it's all going to connect, figured it all out, and then plotted out how I'm going to make my cuts so I can maximize the plywood. Basically what I have here is 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches for the lid. The bottom is 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches. The sides will be 3.25 inches by 8.5 inches. The ends will be 3.5 inches by 3.25 inches, and the other end, there's going to be two different size ends. It will be 3.5 by 3.5. To eliminate as much plywood visibility as possible, I'm going to wait until I get there to make 100% decisions. But right now my thought is that I'll be using like a trim, a mahogany trim or some type of trim that'll complement the oak. Okay, so basically because everything is 3.5, I'm looking at making 3.5 inch long strips out of my 2 feet by 4 foot plywood pieces. I have 4 of those because I bought a 4 by 8 piece of plywood, and I've calculated out that I should get 6 8.5 inch pieces off every 3.5 inch strip. That will be obviously 4 feet long. But I've calculated that down to 5, and the reason is because you always need to calculate in your kerf of your blade, which takes off 1/8 of an inch on every single cut. 8 cuts is an inch. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll show you the process. Okay, so on my last couple episodes, I've noticed a couple things. One of them is I really got to start wearing safety glasses. My glasses are plastic, so they are safe, but they don't cover a large area of my eyes, and it does leave potential to get something in my eye. And without my eyes, I can't do woodworking, and I can't do my day job. So I'm going to be protecting my eyes from now on. I appreciate the comments. It really opened my eyes, so to speak, to exactly, there's no need, really. I made a little joke about it, but in all honesty, it's a very serious and should be at least your eyes protected. Now, because I'm cutting plywood, I'm going to be using a respirator, and the reason why is because in the different plies of wood there's glue and to hold the different plies together, and that glue is going to become a fine dust in the air, and when I breathe it in. I recommend one of these good ones, not just one of the little white face masks. I don't find those really cover the face properly. This one suction cups right to your face, and also for my glasses I don't get the fog coming up because it doesn't breathe out up by my nose. What I'm going to be doing here, let's get into the project. I'm going to be setting up my fence to 3.5 inches from inside the blade. Now first thing, table saw is unplugged. That was something else I noticed with my last video. I didn't unplug my table saw. I mean, I do keep my fingers away from the blade at all times anyway, and sometimes I don't if I'm just, whatever. But when I'm going to be having my fingers near it, I should unplug it, and why not? Okay, so I got that right on 3.5, and just a slight hair above that. Like just a fraction of a hair above above 3.5, and that's because I'm going to be sanding it a little bit, and I do need them exactly 3.5 to the finished product. So I lock my fence down and do one more check, 3.5, 3.5, inside blade. Well, for my first cut, I'm going to make a cut. I'll measure that piece just to make sure the entire thing is coming out as expected. I'm just setting my blade here, a tooth above the actual plywood, because you don't need too much blade sticking out. It's just not needed. It doesn't matter. So there's my first strip. Exactly 3.5. Exactly 3.5. And exactly 3.5. When you're making a project and you're going to be doing mass cuts, one thing, like I just cleaned my blade and I have it's a nice sharp newish blade. And I also have a zero clearance throat that I made for my table saw. So one thing that prevents is tear out, and on the bottom it might tend to break out on your wood. This one didn't, which is what I checked for, because, well, if it was tearing out, what you can do to eliminate that is use a little bit of masking tape along the strip of the cut, and that'll stop any tear out. But I don't need to do that because of my zero clearance, and the blade itself is in good clean shape. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of these cuts, and then we will move on. Okay, so I have my pieces cut. Each one has to be 8.5 inches long. So off one strip, every 8.5 inches I need to make a cut, and then I can get 5 8.5 inch pieces out of one of these. Based on the calculation, I need 2 sides, a bottom, and a lid. That's 4 pieces at 8.5 by 3.5 per box. I want to try and get 10 boxes here. So that makes 44 times 10 boxes, 40 sides that I need. Because I can get 5 out of each strip, that means 40 divided by 5, I need 8 strips to get my 10 boxes. And then I need a couple strips for my sides, for my 2 end pieces. So I'm going to cut my sides now. I'm going to show you a little trick that I've got. It'll help speed up the process and get every single cut exactly the same. So this here is a jig that I've made. It's called a table saw sled. They're invaluable. If you have a table saw and you do any kind of woodworking, they are perfect to have and well worth the time to make. I made mine so that it's versatile. I have a track on the bottom that runs, and what it does is it slides in the track, and I can make my cuts just like that. And I can make repetitive cuts because I can take a block, put it at a certain spot, slide my piece up to it, slide, cut, slide, move the piece, slide the length back in, slide, cut. Okay, now I gotta tighten. I'm gonna do one more check. They're looking good at 8.5. Before I go cutting my actual project piece, I'm just gonna take a scrap piece of wood, put it in, do a cut, measure it, make sure it's 8.5. And we're looking at exactly 8.5 inches. We're ready to go. Too long as it is, but you can see how efficient that is. I now have 40 pieces of side pieces and bottom and lids, so we'll put that together after. I still need to cut my rabbets.